Hi guys, today we're going to finish up the notes for the geologic time packet. So I think there were some words that were repeated on page 3, but you're pretty much going to be on page 4 after this slide. So most of you guys know that the age of the Earth is about 4.6 billion years, and how they figured that is that some of the oldest rocks found on the continents is 4 billion years old, and that's actually in northwest Canada. There's also some detrital zircons that were found in some younger sandstone, dated back to about 4.3 billion years ago. We know that meteorites and moon rocks are about 4.6 billion years. So anything older than 4.0 billion years ago would have probably been destroyed by weathering and or plate tectonics. So looking at the fossil record can be a really interesting part of geology, and this basically entails looking at fossils. So fossils are the remains of animals and plants that once lived in a previous geologic time. Do you guys know what you call someone who studies fossils? Not a fossilologist, it's a paleontologist. And interpreting the fossil record can be really interesting. It gives you information about the geologic history of Earth, and it gives us important clues to environmental changes that have happened in Earth's past. So this picture right here is actually a marine animal that was discovered, a marine spider that was discovered in France and the mountains of France. So we know that the Alps are not near the ocean right now, but it tells us that at one point they were underwater. Ways that an entire organism can be preserved are numerous. The first way is through mummification, and you guys are probably familiar with the Egyptians being mummified, but what happens is this really only works in very dry places where bacteria that cause decay can't survive. This is a picture of sort of a mummified horse. And often, with the Egyptians, they actually made super dry chambers that the humans were actually prepared within and left in. And it actually works pretty well. Another way is to find organisms in amber. Basically, that's just hardened tree sap. And insects will occasionally get trapped in there. And occasionally, in rare cases, the DNA of organisms that insect ate would be in there, and that's kind of the premise for the movie Jurassic Park, where they find a mosquito in some amber that had obviously bitten a dinosaur before it got fossilized, and they were actually able to use the DNA to clone dinosaurs in that science fiction movie. There's actually a new Jurassic Park coming out at the end of this month. Another way is animals or plants would get preserved is through tar seeps. So big, thick petroleum oozes would actually trap the animals, and they've found, I think they found a woolly mammoth in one of these tar seeps, but they've found other plants as well. So they get stuck in there, they die, and then that oily petroleum surface is able to preserve them. Another way is through freezing, and basically that frozen soil and ice will protect and preserve the organism. And here's a picture, I kind of got them covered, of a woolly mammoth that was frozen in the ice, and they were able to find him, and now they've got his DNA, which is kind of cool. And finally, there's something called petrification, where minerals basically replace the original organic material and then gets covered by layers of sediment. So there's a petrified tree, and it's actually a rock now, but silica replaced all the organic material, and it looks almost exactly like a tree, but it's actually a rock. There are a couple different types of fossils. The first type of fossils are imprints, and these often leaves or stems of flowers, and fish will make this in soft clay or mud and leave evidence of an organism that once lived during that time. Another way is through molds and casts. So what happens is the shell decays and leaves an empty cavity within sedimentary rocks, and then sand and mud either fills it in or it leaves an imprint there. I mean, it makes like a three-dimensional cast. Coprolites, kind of gross, but it's fossilized dung and waste material. Occasionally, the conditions are right for that. And finally, there's gastroliths, which are basically stones that we're pretty sure dinosaurs had in their digestive system, and they're really smooth, and they're usually found next to fossilized dinosaur remains. Index fossils are basically using fossils to figure out the relative age of rock. So some criteria that has to be met are that the fossils have to be present in rocks scattered over a pretty large region, so maybe on the Grand Canyon and then over in Moab, Utah. The fossil must have features that are really distinguish it from other fossils. And the organism must have lived during a relatively short span in geologic time. And that doesn't mean like years, it means millions of years, but hundreds of millions of years, maybe even. And the fossils have to occur in fairly large numbers within that rock layer. And that's just showing you some index fossils from one place. So number 6 was found over here in this rock, and 4 was found here. They're all in the correct order, but they may be in different layers. Index fossils are used to help figure out absolute age. So because organisms that formed index fossils lived during a relatively short span in geologic time, the rock layer in which they're discovered can be accurately dated. So here's some shale that they used absolute dating to figure out was put down there about 450 to 480 million years ago. And because there's certain fossils in there, they can then assume that this layer is also the same age. The geologic column is basically an ordered arrangement of rock layers based on their relative ages of each other. So as you're going through the Grand Canyon, the oldest material is on the bottom and the youngest is on the top. And we've actually named many of these divisions in geologic time. And the way that works, oldest is always on the bottom. So in terms of the divisions of geologic time, they're broken. The largest division are eons right here, and there have been 4 eons in the Earth's existence. The first 3 are known as the Precambrian time, and they take up most of Earth's history, about 4 billion years. And there's very little fossilized evidence from this eon. Next, we divide geologic time into eras, and that includes 2 or more periods. And right now we're in the Cenozoic era, and we've been in that for about 65 million years. Again, Precambrian takes up most of all of these. And this just shows you some of the eras that we've had. There's the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic, which are the more recent ones. Next, we have periods, and that's basically a subunit of an era, and it's characterized by the specific fossils, and they're usually named for the location where the fossils were found. And then finally, there's an epoch, and an epoch is a division of a period. They're longer than an age, and they we're currently in the Holstein epoch. That's it for your notes today, and we will do some work with this on Monday. Hope you have a great weekend.